It was a time of scarcity and a time of success when Oklahomans wore fur coats and flew in private jets.
Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett joins us in studio today. Mayor, good to see you again. Thank you for your time. He's producing a movie called Oklahoma City, the Boom, the Bust, and the Bomb. And let me set this up real fast. He's been mayor of Oklahoma City since 2004, elected to his fourth consecutive term, which I believe is the first time that has happened. Congratulations, by the way. Before that, a broadcast career, a career in video production. And I asked this opening question with tongue planted firmly in cheek. What could you possibly know about producing a film about Oklahoma City?
You know, a story is a story. I spent 20 years telling 1-minute stories, and then I had a video production career where I told 5- and 10-minute stories for corporate clients. And this is different because it's a full-length motion picture, but I divided it up into chapters. So it's a series of shorter stories that comprise this one long tale of what happened to Oklahoma City between the years of 1970 and 1995.
Well, let's talk about that. Why did you pick that range?
Well, it dawned on me that the city we have today is a direct result of the life experiences of that time period. And there's a famous Oklahoman named Paul Harvey from my generation, not yours. But he had
I grew up listening to Paul Harvey.
Oh, you did?
What
Okay.
a great storyteller, great voice.
Well, he had a franchise called The Rest of the Story, in which he would take an event in history, and then he would tell you what happened before that you probably didn't know. And that was called The Rest of the Story. And I got to thinking, that's kind of what this movie is. You look around Oklahoma City today, you see a lot of really cool stuff. This is the rest of the story. This is when there was not a lot of cool stuff. But a lot of the things that happened in those years of 1970 to 95 have a direct impact on the city we have today.
How much fun was it doing the research for this? Because when you watch the trailer, it's dramatic, and that stuff that was going on in the 70s, I'm like, tell me more. How much did you learn going on?
Well, I love the history, and in interviewing people who were closer to those situations than me, I did learn a lot. I think the biggest eye-opener to me was that Burns Hargis was the FDIC attorney who had to take the order to the federal judge to shut down Penn Square Bank.
And who gets to do that, right?
I've known Burns really well for 10 years, knowing who he was for 20 years. I never knew that in 1982, that was his, one of the toughest jobs a young man can face, is to have to go in there and start that first domino of what would be an incredibly tough row ahead.
Chatting with Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett, his film, which you can see at Harkins Theater on April 10th, Oklahoma City, the Boom, the Bust, and the Bomb. What made you think you wanted to do this? Well,
I realized that by now, some 20 years after the bombing took place, half the people that live in the city now didn't live here 20 years ago. A lot of people have moved here, a lot of young people coming up, and they don't have any reason to have shared the life experiences of that generation. And I think it's a story that needs to be told. The last thing we want to do is repeat some of the mistakes that were made during that time period. And as I said before, I think that what we have today is a direct result of that time period, and I think people will find the story interesting.
We are also producing a documentary, if you will. The Oklahoman and OETA has teamed up. It's a film called Resilience. It is about the Oklahoma City bombing back in 1995. And I'm getting to the question, how did you tell your story? We told it first person wise, whether it was reporters, first responders, Governor Keating. Basically, hey, tell us your thoughts of what you went through. What's your style of delivery for your film?
It's new style. It's both. So people are talking in first person, but I'm filling in the gaps. Where the story needs to be moved along. I narrate much of the story, but there's a lot of really interesting people that they're chosen to interview, and I try to pick people that are lively and can tell a story and some of the things that went on I never knew, and they have affected corporate Oklahoma City. They have affected the energy companies we have today, the development that we have today. A lot of the things that we take for granted today are the direct result of those events.
Well, how did you pick the people that are in the film?
Well, it's a good cross section of people that I knew were good speakers. In other words, just because a person's knowledgeable doesn't make them good in front of a camera.
This is true.
And so I tried to choose people that I knew had an experience of talking in front of people and on camera, and so that was a good part of it. I wanted good orators. good storytellers. And I wanted people that were close up. So about the energy crisis and how the banking industry was affected, and people that were involved in development and on the sports side. And so when I started making a list, one person after another would just kind of fall into place, and I ended up with about 20 to 25 people, politicians, business leaders, and government experts, and of course you can't do a history piece without talking to Bob Blackburn, because Bob Blackburn knows more than anybody else I know.
Speaking about a well-spoken guy who can give you a soundbite.
Absolutely, people are going to enjoy Bob's work in this piece.
For that matter, Burns Hargis, he's a walking soundbite, right? He's
right.
Great on camera. Tell me about the filmmaking process here. Did you get to work with your family? I know your boys, Casey and Mike and Tristan, great guys, and good job for you for raising them that way, but was this a family effort in any way?
All three of them were involved at some stage, and all of the crew was Oklahoma-based, Oklahoma City or Tulsa. I started by settling up the interviews. So I set up 25 interviews about 3 years ago. So 2012 was when I started the interview process. Once I'd gathered the interviews and was kind of doing the research, searching the archives of the Oklahoman and reading the books that were available on this time frame, I then spent a year, because you got to remember, I have another full-time job, so I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this. So it took me a year to kind of write the script and to then get into the editing process. So it was very time consuming. It was probably a year's work, but it took me 3 years because of all the other things I'm busy doing.
Absolutely. Mayor Mick Cornett of Oklahoma City here. Again, screening April 10th at Harkins Theater. A cool thing coming up on April 8th, though, at 2:30 p.m. a Twitter Q&A with Mick Cornett. You can submit your questions. The hashtag is OKC Movie Chat. You can email those in advance at social@okcmovie.com. And this is not just a Twitter chat. I believe there's some video aspects to this, right?
That's right. You probably know more about it than me. It's my first Twitter chat. But yeah, there's a video aspect to it. People will actually see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff at the video chat.
Let me ask you a couple more questions.
Okay.
Of this time period, 1970 to 1995, a lot of change. Mm-hmm. What else needs to change in Oklahoma City?
Well, we need to improve on our shortcomings. Public transit, trying to plan for the city that we're creating. I think a lot of the MAPS 3 projects do that. If you look at the park that we're building, that park is not necessarily for the city we had in 2009 when we passed the election. It's for the city that we're creating, the green space we're going to need for the vibrant downtown core that we're building. It's also the first step in kind of a rail-based transit system. So I think a lot of the stuff that I think, hopefully 50 years from now that people will take for granted had their genesis in MAPS 3 and in this decade. So we're starting what I hope is the next stage of technology that people in Oklahoma City are going to enjoy for decades to come.
And when you were interviewing your 25 people for your film and talking about the change and the growth of Oklahoma City, what was the common thread when they were talking to you? Was it of positive? Was it still looking forward? Yeah, but now we could be so much more. What did you take away from that?
I think one of the threads was when the boom ended and the bust began. I think people just thought it wouldn't last very long. There was an optimism, and and every year got worse. And there's one line that we use, on most of the marketing materials. When it seemed like things couldn't get worse, things got worse. And there's a particular point in the documentary that kind of validates that they thought it couldn't get worse, and then they realized it could. And then, as Burns Hargis put it, then we really crashed. So it was 100 banks failed in the state of Oklahoma. Just imagine. 100 banks in a state our size failing. And it took with it the energy economy, the commercial real estate economy, and the banking economy. They all bottomed out simultaneously.
He's Mayor Mick Cornett, and sir, we thank you for your time today. Congrats on the movie and best of luck with the movie. Again, you can watch it April 10th at Harkins Theater. Sir, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
And when the dust settled, Oklahomans were at rock bottom.
And then we really crashed.
This is the raw, untold story of the most tumultuous time in Oklahoma City history. The story of a generation that would not surrender. The story of us. Oklahoma City. The boom, the bust, and the bomb.